All right guys, Chris here with RackUp+Go, and today we're gonna be running through the install of this Dometic 48V FreshJet AC and heat pump. We're gonna be covering the placement of this on the roof, as well as cutting the hole and then wiring it into the Go power board that has a 48V converter, and you'll be able to tap into all of the power consumption technology that this has in it so that you can optimize your battery usage and power that this unit is delivering. Without further ado, let's get into it. All right, let's start by opening this box up. We've got our warranty statement card, and looks like a 48V sensing line taped right to the top. So we'll set that aside. And then inside, there it is. Nice protective cellophane on top. So there's no rash or anything from the corrugation on the cardboard. Looking pretty solid right here. Pretty sleek unit, low profile. And then you can see, it looks like maybe a larger gap right here, but this is actually some really cool accent lighting on the outside of this unit. So if it looks like it's a big panel gap here, this is a light strip in here to add some flare to the outside of your van. Got our nice little 48V sticker here. Because this does share a profile with the shore power unit, but all the electronics, the main board, firmware and everything is set up for 48V. So we'll lift this up. We've got a lot of foam blocks here for support, roof gasket here, and then our connections, what we'll be making. And then here, this is going to be more of a traditional style air distribution box where we'll have an intake and exhaust. So yeah, shipped in real well. I don't see any damage here or anything like that, so that's awesome. Next step will be finding out where we're gonna put this on the roof. So we're gonna be focusing on putting this at the rear of the van, kind of over where the typical bed area is gonna be. The van is like completely unfinished. It's a shell right now. So we have a plethora of options of where we want to put it. This is going to go back over the bedroom area, and then we'll be doing a vent fan towards the front. So getting that full air circulation from front of the van to the back. So, all right guys, so we unboxed the main unit, and right here we have the air distribution box, or ADB. So this unit is the interior unit. So this is what's going to distribute the air throughout the van. So we'll start by cut the tape on this. All right off the bat, we've got our long ADB bolts. So these are what's gonna go up through the ceiling unit into the AC, and this is what's going to actually secure it to the roof. So we'll set those aside. These pieces, these are the spacers. There should be some thinner ones. They're about half the thickness of this. Yep, I see those underneath there. So this is the spacer for either the outlet air or the incoming air. And this is basically gonna take up the height difference between the unit on top of the roof and your ceiling and a ceiling assembly underneath. So this is pretty nicely packaged here. We've got, yep, there's our, here are our thinner units. So you can see, you can kind of dial in the height there. Spin those around. Set that there. And then our main air distribution box is coming in here. So you can see, got a nice label here, RTU cable. If you're wondering what that stands for, that's rooftop unit cable. And then it says shape on there. I'm not sure what the shape is for. That's a lie, I do know what it is for, but it's secret. All right, so this should be in two pieces because obviously we need to be able to get our bolts, those long bolts that I just had. I believe we'll pass through these four corners here. That's what's gonna hold the unit to the ceiling. So just be very careful here separating these two pieces. All right, so we've got our RTU cable here, rooftop unit cable. It's gonna come in on this side, and then our shape sticker. So this is the part that actually comes off. So if you grab in these corners and pinch, this little piece comes off quite easily. And now we have access. So those 4 bolts that I held up previously, those are gonna go through here. So our ceiling assembly is gonna mount up. Our bolts come up through here, and that's what's gonna hold everything up to the roof. And then this cover comes back on, snaps in here, just like that. So our connections, we've got a rooftop cable here, and then we have 2 other Molex connectors on this side. We've got our air temperature sensor right here, and that's pretty much it. So these 2 cutouts or silhouettes here, these are actually lights. So this does have an interior ceiling light, so that's a really nice feature. And then we have adjustable air vents here. These are not motorized, these are gonna be manually adjusted, so you can kind of direct the air that's coming out. So outlet air comes down, it's divided, and it's gonna shoot towards the back of the van and towards the front, and then incoming air is gonna end up passing through these screen vents here. So this does have, looks like some removable vents. Should be removable so that you can clean them. Pet hair, dust, pollen, things like that. You can actually pull this out, rinse it off under some water, and that slides back in. Pops in just like that. And then there's the same one on the opposite side right here, so you can pull this out. Just believe it pushes up and then slides out like that. So this little tab here, seemed like the move was grabbing that. Awesome. So we'll get the unit mounted up on top of the roof, and then this is going to be kind of the last piece. Once all the power wiring and everything that comes down, that'll pass out to the side. The unit will come down through, plug in. There's a little port, I believe, on there, and then there's another small one here where the communication cable is going to hook in. So, and that sticker on here saying it should go to this side. So that cable will come down, pass through this little relief here. All right, guys, so one of the best ways to simulate the placement on the roof is gonna be to use the cardboard box that the product came in. And what I've done here is taken the flap off the side, cut it roughly to the length of the unit, and then I've made a couple markings on here, just marking out our 14 by 14 opening. So I'm just gonna quick sketch some lines on here. There's gonna be roughly our front, the rear, and then the middle. And now what we'll do is we'll take this up, place it on top of the roof. So we do have a roof rack already mounted up there with the crossbars, and this is gonna kind of allow us to estimate where we want to place the unit, so, and where we want to place the crossbars on the roof rack surrounding the unit. So we've got our 14 by 14 opening here, the back of the unit's going to be about here, and the front of the unit's going to be about to here. And then we can also check this on the inside, just to make sure we're not, where we're putting our 14 by 14 opening isn't landing over the top of one of those roof braces that comes up from the side. So we'll take this, we'll move this to the inside of the van, just mock it up real quick. We'll come back out to the top of the van, set this on the top, and then we'll start to get our 14 by 14 hole kind of marked out where we're gonna have this. We'll use more cardboard. We'll probably use one of these side flaps here. We'll get this marked out to a 14 by 14 square. We'll do a cross here to find the center point. We'll put that on the inside of the van. We'll drill a hole through the cardboard and through the roof of the van. And then we'll take that cardboard template from the inside, bring that out to the top, and where the hole is, we'll place this template on there and trace our 14 by 14 opening. So that's gonna ensure that we don't hit one of those cross braces and our 14x14 opening is going to be exactly where we want it to be. All right guys, so we got our cardboard template out here. We've got a couple different options that we can choose from. We've got this first bay here, and we can see, so I've got my lines marked here. This will fit the 14x14 opening. The unit, you can kind of picture, this is where it would be supported by this roof brace and this roof brace. What I don't like about this spot is this seam. So we've got the roof panels coming together, seamed right here. That's gonna be a double layer of sheet metal that we're gonna have to cut through. It's also just another entry point for water to come in. So I think we're gonna pass on this spot, even though it's decent, and shift back to this one. And then we can see we've got enough room with our 14x14 fitting in here nicely. We've got support from this roof brace. We've got support from this roof brace. Our 14x14 is fitting in here pretty nicely, and it's actually, so this is about center line of the van based on this plug here coming up. It looks like we can center our 14x14 right between these two ridges in the roof. And so when we go back up to the top, we'll just place our center of our 14x14 and kind of mock up the unit just to make sure everything's gonna fit. We have a crossbar back here, or a crossbar for the roof rack's gonna be over there. So I'm thinking right about here is where we wanna land that unit. That looks good to me. We've got support from here and here. We're not cutting into anything like that. We'll retain that. So we'll move back up top. We'll lay this down on the roof just to make sure where the front of the unit, where the back of the unit is all copacetic with, you know, our crossbars and where our solar panels are gonna end up being. All right guys, so we've got the template and we're up on top of the roof. Really handy if you are installing a roof rack. I would do that before the AC. That way you can kind of get your crossbars. These are still loose here. And actually we've got out of frame, you're not able to see, but we've got the crossbars tightened down in a pallet. The pallet actually that was delivered with the AC. That is our kind of roof support. We'll be able to place the unit up there. We can stand on this pallet and kind of give us a platform so we're not walking all over the roof and damaging it and flexing it and stuff. So we've got our template up here. We decided, if you remember from the inside, going right between these two humps here, this is centered on the van. So we'll take our template, and it looks like, you know, this is a pretty good spot to be installing that AC. Our rear crossbar can go here. You know, we can readjust the other crossbars coming up to the front of the unit, but this is looking like a really good place to put that unit in that 14x14 opening. So next step, we'll get that 14x14 cardboard template, center the hole. We'll do the drill into the hole through the roof, and then we'll get that cut out around the outside, and then we'll prep the surface, the interior, the cut edge of the roof, just with a little primer, keep that from rusting. And then we'll get the AC kind of just mocked up here. The FreshJet 48 volts, probably close to 80 or 90 pounds. So you're definitely gonna wanna have somebody else helping you get it up on the roof. All right guys, so we've lopped off one of the flaps from the box. We're gonna use this for our 14x14 template. We've got a tape measure here, also conveniently on the back of the Ford tailgate. We have a tape measure here, so we're gonna be marking off 14 inches. Right about there. And then 14 inches this way, about there. And now what we're gonna do is we're gonna cut this into a square. That's gonna be our template. We'll use a permanent marker to trace that on top of the roof, but before we do that, we're gonna make an X across this square. That'll mark the center. And we're gonna use that to kind of orient this plate from the inside and then put it out on top to trace around, so we make sure we're not running into any of those roof supports that we have on the interior. So we'll get this sketched out, we'll cut it, and then we'll be all set to move inside the van. We'll drill our hole up through the center. We'll take this template out, put it on top of the roof, trace our box, and then start drilling, and then we can start cutting out the sheet metal roof for our opening. All right guys, so we're up in the van. We've got our 14x14 template here. I'm gonna start by just making a quick little center line between these two roof ribs, because that's where our center hole is going to be. So I'm just gonna line this. Right there. Drop this. And I can see where this is, so you may not, but our roof template is going to go right here. We're gonna mark this hole, just making sure we're centered. That's where we'll drill. And then we'll go up on top of the roof. We'll set this down on top. We'll trace everything out. So the reason we're doing this on the inside is I want to make sure we're not contacting or cutting into these. So if I, just threw it up on top of the roof and, all right guys, so we're gonna drill this hole right here, and you should be wearing safety glasses.
Hello darkness, my old friend.
I've got a special pair right here because it's really bright in here and the sun never sets on a badass, so. All right, so we've got our hole drilled here. We're gonna move this template up to the top. We'll make sure it's square. We'll trace this out. And then the next thing we're gonna do is we'll drill a hole in the corner right about here. So that way we can get our shears in, and we're just gonna cut along here. So we'll make corners. We'll drill holes at each of the corners. So that way we can get the shears angled around each one of these. So we'll show that once we get up on top. All right, so we're up on top of the roof. We've got our 14x14 template. Our hole is drilled here. We've got our center mark on this. And we're just gonna spot that hole. All right, so we've got our template traced out here. We're gonna drill holes in each of the corners so our shears can easily pass around each corner. We can trim it all the way out, but nice to have a little radius here. And then once that's complete, we'll pull this panel out, and then we'll get the AC, move that up here and show you how you can do that. All right, so we've got our drill here. We're gonna pop holes in each of these corners because these are our shears, and we're gonna be coming around each corner. It's gonna make it a little bit easier to make that turn. All right, so we got this one side cut here. You'll notice that this edge is kind of curled up a little bit. That's just due to the nature of the shears and the way they operate. The outside edge that's staying with the van is nice and straight. And so the way we make each of these cuts, this is gonna be on the outside so that we get a nice straight edge here. If we were to cut the other way, we could run the risk of getting a little bit of a curled edge here. It's just one of the things to watch out for when you're using shears like this. You can also use like a set of nippers, I believe they're called. It's kind of like a support on each side, and it nibbles like this. And you'll end up with like a nice coiled strip. It does take out material, so if you use those, you want to make sure you're just to the right of the line, so that way the strip is coming off the inside. If you were to follow the line, you'd end up not much, but just a little bit off the outside of this line, so your hole will be slightly larger. So with the shears, we're able to take right on the line. And honestly, if you're a 1/4 inch off, that foam gasket that's going around the outside is about 1.5 inches thick. So if this thing ends up 14 1/4 by 14 1/4, you're really not risking much there. So we'll continue cutting, again keeping this side to the outside. The part that we're saving, this piece is going to end up being scrap. We got a big hole in our roof.
Wow, what a hole.
All right, our hole, or square rather, is cut. Now I went all the way to these corners. You don't necessarily have to. You can leave these radius as long as the radius is small enough and not in the way of the mounting bolts and everything. I'd actually probably recommend leaving it radius like that, just because now we've got kind of a stress corner here. Where these two points meet over time, fatigue and everything, this could be a source of maybe like a stress crack or something in the sheet metal here. But this is going to be fully supported in here. So we're not too concerned about it. Obviously this is, the shear's not great for going over these ridges in the roof here. This is actually going to get all primered, we'll cover all this stuff up so that this doesn't end up rusting or anything like that. But if your cut ends up like this, don't worry about it. The AC is going on top of it. The whole fan's going to end up getting finished on the inside. Nobody's ever going to see this except for you. This is just kind of the ugly part of it. So we'll get this all primered, you know, covered up so it doesn't end up rusting. Then it'll be time to get the AC set up on here and start getting that mounted. All right, so I've got my safety glasses on now because I'm throwing some sparks. So what I'm doing here is using this angle grinder and just kind of hitting these edges to clean up some of these burrs. And then also where it kind of bent this ridge over a little bit, the paint's kind of flaking here. So I'm just sanding that back to a spot so that the paint's not flaking off. I don't really want to paint over it with primer and have you know, it just flake off later. So I'm just sanding this back to a spot where the paint's still adhering. And then knocking all of these edges down because they are a little bit sharp. So just a sanding wheel on an angle grinder and kind of just very lightly touching all of these edges, and then, you know, obviously sanding this back a little bit here. All right guys, we're back up on top of the roof. We've actually knocked all these edges down from inside and outside. Got this paint kind of pulled back here so that it's not flaking off anywhere. And now we're going to clean the area, prepping it for the primer that's going to go on there so that we don't have any rusting issues or anything like that. So we've got some parts cleaner here. This is going to clean up this edge really nice, making sure that we're ready to go for the paint and priming area. So we're going to do this on the top, then we'll come back, we'll tape this off so that, you know, we've got maybe an inch here or so, and we'll do the same thing on the bottom, and then we'll hit that with all the primer and making sure that this is, you know, a really good, well-prepped surface for that primer so we don't have any rusting issues, because that AC is going to be moving quite a bit of air. Some of it's definitely going to be some humid air, and we don't really want, you know, condensation or anything like that building up on this edge and causing some rusting and discoloration issues later on. All right guys, we got our opening all taped off here. We're gonna be using this Rust-Oleum automotive primer to just prep this surface here, just so that we don't have any rusting issues if, you know, there's condensation or moisture that gets on this edge. You know, it's all been cleaned up with the parts cleaner, so we should have a really good strong bond. So we're just gonna go through, spray this edge. If you really wanna go to town on it, you can come back and do like an actual automotive paint and match it to the color of the roof. But again, this is all going to be covered up with an AC unit after the fact. So, you know, it's up to you. We can do some movie magic here. So we'll wait till this is all dry and then come back, take a look at it, make sure we got everything, and possibly do a second coat if we need to. All right guys, we've got the unit roughly in position here. What I'm doing right now is just checking the gaps around here, and this unit is made for kind of a flat roof for an RV. So I'm just gonna kind of adjust and see if we can't minimize some of those gaps. We do have a fan on up there, so I do feel some air, I feel quite a bit of air coming through here. So what I think we're gonna need to do is replace the bottom gasket on this. We have one that is specifically made for van roofs, so these little ribs that are in here, it'll compensate for that rib and can really conform to these rib layers and seal up these gaps, because we really don't want to have these gaps and trying to fill that with RTV or some sort of roof sealant like Sikaflex. This is about the thickness of my finger, so probably 3/8 or so, maybe a 1/2 inch in some areas. So we're definitely going to need to replace this gasket. So we're just gonna, what you want to do is get it pretty much roughly in position, and then you can kind of from the inside just pushing up and just shimmy the unit back a little bit. Now the edges of our gasket are pretty much lined up all the way around. Yeah, this is looking really nice right now. So our wiring's gonna come down from here, We're gonna run that off around to the side. Our power system's gonna be back down here in this corner. So that's where all of these cables are gonna end up running to. We've got our communication cables here. This, wow, it's very red, black, green, and yellow. And then we've got this jacketed cable here. This is the ADB communication. It's nicely labeled right here on this heat shrink jacket. And this is gonna be our CAN high, low, and then our power source positive and negative. My guess is the voltage sensing lines here. Oh, nope, voltage sensing lines are gonna be coming out of here. So this, I'm assuming this connector is probably gonna be for the intelligent features for optimizing the energy usage. So once we get this gasket kind of swapped out to conform to these grooves here, we'll show you the wiring process. So we're just gonna be running that out down the side into our power board. So we'll get that gasket on, show you how that conforms to the roof, and then get this unit replaced back on top and then jump into the wiring. All right guys, back up on the roof, we've got our stock Dometic gasket. So this is generally made for like a flat RV roof. So this is just the standard gasket that they have on pretty much all of their shore power units. This is actually a little bit too firm of a durometer to be able to conform to these ridges. So we do have this gasket, it's much softer. It's going to conform to all of these ridges. And we've got our Sikalast here that we're going to be applying just around the bottom edge, right along here on the outside. So we're actually going to remove this gasket, pull this off here. It does remove very easily, and then our new gasket is going to fit, you know, pretty much right where that one came off. This is just, you know, direct replacement designed for, you know, conforming to these ridges in the roof. So we'll start peeling the adhesive backing off. The adhesive side goes down to the roof. All right. We'll very carefully get this lined up here because this is some pretty sticky stuff. Make sure we press it into the corners here. The adhesive is really quite strong, quite good. So once you get this thing placed, you're gonna wanna make sure you're not applying too much pressure to it until it is exactly where you want it. Just working our way all the way around. And you can kind of see the imprint my hand is leaving on this gasket. So this thing is pretty much going to self-level, fill in all these little gaps. This is making sure we're not losing any cold air to the outside or warm air to the outside, because this is also a heat pump. And then also no water leaks. So it's looking pretty good. Just be careful pushing too close to this edge. Obviously you don't want to bend that in too much. And where I'm sitting, actually there's a support member just behind here. That's where I'm sitting on. If you're up here walking around on the van, I don't recommend walking anywhere towards the center of the roof. You definitely want to try and make sure you're staying like on one of these supports. So there's one right here in front, there's one right here where I'm sitting, and then if you're adjusted more over towards the sides, it's going to be a lot stronger. So just keep that in mind when you're up here working. Perfect. And then we've got our Sikaflex. All right guys, we're back inside the van. We've got the AC unit really nicely centered on here. Looking up at this gasket, there are no gaps. You can see right in here, this is all completely filled in now. All along this side, no light coming through. It's looking really well centered, so this is right where it's gonna live. We've got our power and communication cables. These are gonna be coming out and then chasing down the driver's side of the vehicle. So we have our air distribution box framed in here. And what this is going to do, this is going to come up, our cables are going to pass through this little notch that we have here. And we'll fill that in with foam as well, so that way the air is staying all inside this box. I'm going to push these up out of the way for now, so you got the idea. The cables are going to go through there. This is just going around the outside of the 14x14 opening, so we'll get this mounted up in here. When the van gets finished out with the interior, this is actually going to get framed in, so this will be nailed into position. I won't have to hold it up here like this, but for this install, what we'll be doing is actually just sandwiching the ADB, this box, this framed box, between the ADB and the AC unit. So we'll get the ADB in here, we'll get the bolts running up through there, get those started, and then we'll tighten those down, and as those tighten down, it'll hold this box into place for this install until we get to the part of, you know, framing out the inside, furring out the walls, and actually doing the ceiling and everything like that. That's when this box will actually get tied into the rest of that. So for now, this is just gonna get sandwiched in. So we're gonna grab the ADB, the bolts, get those started, and getting this installed. All right guys, we've got our box here, we've got our ADB, and then we've got our stack of styrofoam or insulating plenum, so that's going to mate up to this surface here. So we've kind of just done a little check, mated this up to the ceiling. We've got our notch here, we're going to try and finagle that into position here. Just checking everything, making sure it's all lining up, and then try and be crafty here. Some of the bolts. We don't need that one. Our bolts here are going to go up. We gotta find the hole in the unit. This is a little bit easier if you have the box already framed in. Just gotta find the hole it threads into once we get that started. It will self-support. There we go. Come across to this diagonal. That's going to come through here. All right, that'll balance itself. Now we'll get these other bolts started. Grab that one that I dropped. That's gonna go in this last corner here. All right, now it's all about cinching these bolts up, tightening them down. And that's going to secure the unit to the roof, and it's also going to be securing this ADB to the ceiling assembly here. So we've got our notch cut out over here. We'll probably put a little bit of some cable protectant here because it's coming across on this edge of our 14x14 opening. So through vibration and things like that, I don't really want those cables to be rubbing up against the metal edge of the roof opening. So probably get just some cable protection here, and then we'll finish tightening these bolts up and showing you kind of snapping that cover on and kind of the finished product here. So. All right guys, we got our ADB installed with our ADB box. These are all snugged up, and what we're going to be doing now is actually torquing these down. So the torque spec on these bolts is 40 to 50 inch-pounds. If you're going the metric system, that's about 5 Newton meters. So we'll just start tightening this down with this torque wrench, which will beep once we've reached the torque that we're looking for. There's our 45. On that one. There we go. All right guys, we got our ADB all secured here. Everything's been torqued down to 45 inch-pounds, all these 4 bolts. Just giving it a little tug. It's very solid on here. It's not going anywhere. Got our wires prepped here for doing the additional wiring. And then we've got our last little cover here. And this is gonna go on this spot just like this. There we go. All right, now she's ready for power. All right guys, that completes our install of the Dometic 48V FreshJet AC and heat pump. Everything's ready to go for our wiring, so stay tuned for another video where we'll be covering tying this into that Go Power power board. If you have any questions about this unit or the install, feel free to give us a call or email us at customercare@rackupgo.com. And remember, life's an adventure, rack up and go.